All right, thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. And my guest is investigative journalist Trevor Loudon. Trevor has written many articles and I believe books on political issues, particularly with regard to the encroachment of international communism on politics, both domestically and internationally. Trevor, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Look, it's an honor to be here, Charles. Thanks for having me.
Trevor, I'm concerned about what's going on in Congress right now and in the country, given the guise of this emergency. It was the famous quote from Rahm Emanuel, who was Obama's chief of staff, when he said on a nationally televised program, "Don't let a good crisis go to waste." And of course, what they mean by going to waste is don't let an opportunity slip by where the American people might be more susceptible to the idea of a ratcheting up of federal powers and international powers, and a communistic system. And that's, in a de facto sense, what we almost have right now, with people being sheltered in their homes in many states, with the left clamoring for all states to have this. I think that if Hillary Clinton had been president right now, we would have martial law. We would probably have concentration camps where people would either, who might go outside. We would have the nationalization of entire portions of our industry. In fact, Mayor Bill de Blasio called for that, and now he's calling for the military to come out of their bases and start to patrol cities. So, the worst tendencies of the left are coming to play here. And the most recent news being that Congress is now setting up a new committee to investigate the president, which tells me they're getting ready for yet another impeachment. What say you, Trevor? What's your research?
Well, just on that committee, I know that Adam Schiff has called for investigations of the president. Well, Adam Schiff is very tied to a group called the Committee of 100, which is China's main propaganda arm and influence arm in this country. Now, you can see China has tried to use this opportunity all the way, absolutely all the way, to drive down the American economy, to promote themselves as the savior of the world, to build bridges to Europe, to tout the advantages of a socialized healthcare system over the anarchic American system. So it's not surprising that someone as friendly to China as Adam Schiff should be calling for this. But this is what I say. There would have been no crisis without the left-wing media. What we would have done, we would have said, okay, this is a new disease. It's similar in characteristics to an influenza, SARS or something. We know a little bit about this, how to deal with it. We don't shut down the country every time there's a flu epidemic. Even though flus will kill 80,000 people a year sometimes, I think we'll top out at about 30 or 40,000 deaths in this. I don't think the deaths are going to be anywhere near as much as they're touting right now. But the left is saying, okay, this is going to be a huge panic. If President Trump doesn't shut down everything, if President Trump doesn't do this, he's guilty. He's guilty for everyone who dies. So therefore, the Republican Party and Trump are under enormous pressure. They're thinking, well, we don't really want to shut this down, and we know it's not going to really help that much, and we know it's going to wreck the economy. But if we don't shut it down, there's a lot of deaths, we'll get blamed for it between now and the election. So they've sort of forced him into a corner, and now they're putting all this pork into their bills, to the bills, why the Carnegie Endowment for the Arts got money or something like that.
Kennedy Center. We don't even know what's in the thing. I mean, it's obviously something that never would have happened under the guise of anything but an emergency. And now you have a spending bill that is $2 trillion. It's bigger than any spending bill in history, and no one's read it. It's another one of these things that was conveniently set up in advance and suddenly passed without, it's almost as if, hey, it was already ready to go.
They had their wish list and they would have brought it out in any crisis. And just like Obama did, with his crisis after, when he got elected after the big economic crash, hundreds of $1 million were funneled to the left. Hundreds of millions of dollars kept his movement going. Well, this will be exactly the same this time. The left will get huge amounts of money out of this, which they will then use to try and defeat Trump in the election. So this is what could have happened is they could have got onto this early if the Chinese hadn't been so dishonest. They sort of said, right, there are certain susceptible people. We're going to quarantine those people. We're going to test those people. We're going to bring in widespread testing, but we're going to let the economy go on like we do in any flu, like we do in a measles epidemic or anything else that kills a lot of people. How many bankruptcies, suicides, broken marriages are going to come out of this? I think there'll be more deaths from the fallout, immediate fallout, than there will be for the actual cure.
I understand that of all countries, Sweden actually is handling things very, very well in that what they've done is they've done sort of what you're saying here. They've sequestered their most vulnerable people, the elderly, people of pre-existing conditions, and they've allowed everyone else to get to work and continue on as usual. And I just had a doctor on the program who explained to me that, this whole idea of avoiding any disease or germs, it results in a society not building up proper immunities, and then the result is that we're going to end up going out again, and then we're really going to get sick, or we're going to be sequestered with elderly people in the same house in many cases, in which case we're leaving them even more vulnerable. So the public policy on this thing is very questionable.
Yeah, it is. And I can understand exactly why Trump's doing it, because he's backed into a corner. And right now he's backed into a shutdown. I think he's going to do the shutdown, slow the curve, as they say, slow the curve, and then he's going to start easing it off. That's what I think he wants to do. And sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned. But he's got to get to a point where the fatalities are, where the peak is, we're over the peak. And I think that peak will come in April, mid to late April. And I think after that, the controls will come off.
Well, they're even admitting now that it already is happening in terms of there's a slowing down of the number of fatalities and cases. And also seems to be this strange attempt, maybe they're getting over it now, but to avoid mention of any sort of drugs that can actually deal with helping people who are in critical condition, such as hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax. Apparently, Twitter has decommissioned many big accounts just because they mentioned this word, hydroxychloroquine. Anyways, Fox News the other night had on a doctor in New Jersey who says he's treated 62 people with coronavirus with hydroxychloroquine, all of them of whom are better. So what is the sudden skittishness about keeping secret a drug that actually could be a game changer in this whole thing?
Well, because the left has an agenda here. The Chinese left on an international level are glorifying China, trying to take the blame away from China, trying to put the blame on Trump, trying to tout the effectiveness of socialism and how China's this wonderful country helping everybody else out. And here, the left want to drive the economy into the gutter. They want to denigrate Trump every second of the way, magnify every death, whatever it can. So they don't want a cure. They know they've got a candidate, Joe Biden, who is absolutely useless.
Right.
And they're going to, I think they'll probably have to end up parachuting Andrew Cuomo in or something. But they want to keep the crisis going. As Rahm Emanuel says, you use the crisis and you extend the crisis. You don't just, this could be dragged on for months if the Democrats have their way. This will be dragged on right till the election if the Democrats have their way. They don't look. They have kept the borders open for years with the death toll of the drugs coming in, the illegal immigrant killings, and everything else that goes with it in tens of 10, 20, 30,000 a year. They've kept that going. They don't care about that because that serves their purpose. If this did not serve their purpose, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing.
No, I mean, obviously it serves their purpose to prolong the thing as long as possible because it'll wreck the economy and they think it's going to hurt Trump and they don't care if it results in people suffering and dying. I mean, that's a given. Otherwise, why do they support communist China, which is responsible for the killing of 50 million people? That doesn't matter. That's all just collateral and their great and glorious goose stepping forward into the revolution, in my opinion.
Well, exactly. And you think about this. If our economy is, see, Obama wrecked the US military. He had the greatest military in the world, and now it's a lot weaker than it was when Obama started office. Trump's been trying to rebuild it. He's been rebuilding it on the back of a strong economy. How's he going to rebuild the military when the economy is in the tank? So it's always in the interest of the left and China and Russia to drive the economy down so we cannot afford military spending. The Chinese are going breakneck on their military. The Russians are going breakneck. We were starting to do it. Trump was putting the money in, getting things done. We haven't built a nuclear weapon in America since 1992. Their shelf life is 20 years. So he understood the urgent need to rebuild that deterrent. Well, how's that going to happen now if the economy goes completely into depression? How's he going to sell the American people on rebuilding the military when they haven't got jobs? See, this has implications way beyond the economic. This is strategic. This is military, international. The Russians and the Chinese will be rubbing their little hands in glee over this, and that's why they want to keep it going as long as they can, because every weapon America doesn't build is one left they have to counter when it comes to the crunch.
Yeah, I mean, look at it. What you're saying, I mean, is making me think that, yes, you have China and Russia moving forward, full steam ahead. They don't care if their people die. China, they probably released the virus themselves because they wanted to get rid of some people. I don't know. I mean, It's a communist country, but yet it's now spread to the Western democracies, not just the United States, but Europe and I think the Asian Rim countries. And these are the countries that they have been trying to defeat since day one. So,
yeah,
I mean, here you have it, where all of us are hurting economically as a result of this, and it just looks a little too neat that this would happen like this.
Well, it happened just after China had got beaten up on trade with the United States, just after the problems in Hong Kong, and they had been losing face. Trump had been kicking them, and now they've There's two things. The Chinese have biological weapons. They've always been intending to use them. The only question is on this one, was it an accidental release or was it a deliberate release? Because I think it was released, whether it was some greedy scientist selling a laboratory animal on the open market in Wuhan. But see, here's what the Chinese did. In the Chinese New Year, which is in January, I believe, every year they have this massive, what they call a big potluck dinner, and thousands of people attend this event from all over the world, right all over the world. So the local people said the outbreak was just beginning. The local people said, should we cancel this event? Because people were coming from Canada, from Australia, from Britain, from the United States to this massive celebration. The Chinese Communist Party said, no, do not cancel it. So you can imagine the thousands of people that came here, the thousands of people that went straight back to Canada and Australia and New Zealand and Europe, where they're all working, and that's how it got a foothold. So the Chinese Communist Party is either guilty of extreme negligence, criminal negligence, or it's guilty of a deliberate plan to wreck the world economy. Because you think the Chinese, say they lose 2% of their old people. That's 2% of people they don't have to feed when it comes to war. What do they put first? Do they put winning a war first, or defeating or keeping their economy and their military going? America and the West will not let their old people die. They will spend anything it takes to not let their old people die. China doesn't have to do that. So China will take a hit, but not as much of a hit as we do. You know?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's like a planned release. What do they care if they have to knock off some of their own people? I mean, we're talking here about a communist country that has no understanding of Western notions of morality, of the value of human life. And our strength, which is our value of human life, in this case, is our weakness also, because we're willing to go to such great lengths to save life and to preserve life, that we're caught in a very difficult vice. It's kind of like a scissors effect. And
they're using our virtues against us.
That's right, which is a classic communist tactic. So here we are now, and I think that I see the left trying to prolong this thing as long as possible. As Rahm Emanuel said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. And has everybody in a state of absolute fear. I mean, I know people like this who are cowering around in the house and who are just terrified of this thing, like outside. It's almost like a horror movie from the 1930s.
You'd think it was the bubonic plague, by the way people were reacting, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and exactly. And it's a flu, and it is a more contagious flu than a regular flu. And yes, I actually think it's a good idea to take, as a matter of public health, to take precautions like social distancing, which is something I think is a good thing. I think we should do it anyways. I don't want to come into contact with people. And handshakes, it's like an American custom that probably it might be re-examined. Why touch people unnecessarily? So I mean, these are all reasonable things to do. And it's also reasonable that if you have a sickness, if you've got diabetes, or if you have heart disease or cancer, that you do stay away until it's over. The government can advise in that way. But this whole shutdown is very, very suspicious to me.
Yeah, well, I think that the left drove it. The left pumped up the hysteria to the maximum. So the administration had to take firm action, strong action, to be seen to be doing it. And they had to take more extreme action than probably was actually warranted or was effective, because a lot of the cure will be worse than the disease. A lot of businesses are shut down, won't reopen. I was talking to a guy in Iowa the other day. He was talking to his local police sergeant. He said suicides are through the roof. But you will not hear about that, because the left will not publicize that, because that would put pressure.
They'll publicize it later. They'll probably publicize it later, because if they think it'll help them. Situation.
Well, but right now they want to say no. They don't want to emphasize the suicides, because people realize the cost of the shutdown in lives. What are we going to get? 10,000 suicides and 30,000 deaths through the virus, or what's the balance here? But we don't shut down the country for the flu, and the flu kills tens of thousands of people every winter. This is a panicked response. And I'm not saying social distance isn't good, and quarantining certain people isn't great. All of these things have to be done. Shutting down the borders. How the left screamed for a start when Trump wanted to shut down the border with China.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, one of the silver linings in this whole thing is that now people are aware of the fact that national borders are essential as basically a progressive institution. When Trump shut down the border to China in January, we've seen, I remember the howls of rage from the left. Oh, he's doing it because he's got something against Chinese men and women, right? He's prejudiced. That's why he's doing this. And now, of course, you had the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, saying the same thing and waving, a fist at Trump. And now he's finally shut his border after there's already a lot of disease.
Yeah.
European Union, they shut the border just last weekend after there's already over 1,000 deaths in Italy. So, this shows the value of dealing with controlling a national border in the same way that we control our own borders, which is what we're all doing now by being stuck in the home.
Yeah, that's right. Why are borders good in social distancing? Why is being inside good, but protecting your country from international threats not good? It's whatever the left, whatever suits the left at the time, that's what becomes good.
Right. And the other thing, I mean, even states are washing their borders now. I mean, you've got, Rhode Island is checking license plates from people coming in from New York. So, I mean, the idea of protecting the homeland is something that could come out of this thing it's sort of backfiring.
I think that will be a very good thing that will come out of this. People also realize that we shouldn't be engaged with China, that we shouldn't have 90% of our drugs coming from China, a lot of our manufactured goods coming from China. A lot of people just didn't have any clue about this.
Yes,
well, now
exactly.
they do. And I hope to see at the end of this, after Trump is, after things settle down a little bit, that Trump takes major steps against China. And I'm talking trade, I'm talking repatriating businesses from China, forbidding certain exports to China, cancelling of student visas from China, and absolutely banning all Chinese media and business ownership in this country. I think all of those things have to happen.
There are some things going in that direction. I know Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee has a bill to manufacture drugs and pharmaceuticals and medical supplies domestically in response to the fact that so much of this is being done in China now. And that, I think you're right on the money on that. And also another positive byproduct of this is that American citizens are now more aware of the importance of being self-sufficient, of prepping, of having 4 to 6 weeks of supplies at hand in case there's an emergency, of homeschooling. Of another thing, I mean, people are working from home, they're telecommuting. That might mean that more people are going to stay home now and not want to go back to these big offices where they have to punch a time clock. And it's going to result in people being more involved with their families. There's going to be more homeschooling. There's going to be more, in a way, it's almost a return to the idea of the agrarian American society before the Industrial Revolution.
I've been thinking about that. I think a lot of that will happen. There will be a lot of positives that come out of this.
Yes.
And because, people will be, look, there'll be some better marriages and more divorces after this. There'll be both. There'll be some that'll strengthen. There'll be some families that strengthen out of this and some that split. So what do they say? War brings out the best and the worst of us. Well, this is sort of like the nearest most of us have been to wartime conditions.
Yes.
The closest, not quite rationing and, no bombing raids, but shut down, locked down, being isolated, uncertain, more fearful than usual. So, I think this is going to bring out the best of Americans and in some degrees the worst, but I don't want it to go on for too long because the damage to our economy and our military preparedness is pretty bad. And right now, like out in the Pacific Ocean, you've got, their aircraft carriers are in trouble because they've got people sick all over them. Well, I think the Chinese would probably be looking at that thinking, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a military possibility. So, yes, it's very, very troubling. And I think that, and I hope that the thing will be over by the end of this month. And Trevor Loudon, you have a long record of researching the communist involvement in American politics and elsewhere. What's going on now with that? I mean, what do you have lately on your research radar?
Well, I just put out a book recently called White House Reds. It's on Amazon. It's called White House Reds, Communists, Socialists, and Security Risks Standing for U.S. President 2020. And what I do in that book is I profile 10 people who stood for president for the Democrats, the 10 who were still running as of January the 1st. Now, most of them have dropped out now, but every single one of them had a Marxist background. I'm talking Pete Buttigieg. I'm talking Amy, Mrs. Nice, Minnesota Klobuchar, complete Marxist background. Julian Castro, Cory Booker, obviously Bernie, Tom Steyer, and Biden. Biden has worked in the interests of Moscow his entire political career, and I lay it out. He was recruited by people an organization set up by KGB agents. That's who got him into the US Senate in the first place back in 1972, and they used him to gut the US military every step of the way while he was a senator, to stand against Reagan. So what my thesis is this. See, the Democrats have freaked out because Bernie, see, the difference between Bernie and Biden is this. Bernie is a communist who's too dumb to hide it. Biden is a communist who's smart enough to hide it. And the Democrats were freaking out because they knew if Bernie got it, Trump was going to hammer them. They had to get rid of Bernie, and they left it so late. The only alternative was Biden. Now they have to get rid of Biden because he is just out to lunch.
He's too bad. Yeah, it's horrible. And of course, the other thing about Biden is that people don't remember the fact that when he first came into the Senate, along with other freshmen like Patrick Leahy, and they were part of a with Ted Kennedy as leader, they cut the throat of South Vietnam, and this was after the peace treaty by cutting off all military aid. Within a week after that, or 2 weeks, North Vietnam launched a full invasion. So, these are little aspects of history that reveal what you are talking about quite accurately. And
exactly. Lee Leahy, Ted Kennedy, and Biden and John Kerry would be the foremost dangerous senators we've probably had. All of them I regard as traitors. And three of them sold out South Vietnam, exactly as you say. But see, the thesis of my work, I released my movie Enemies Within in 2016. And I say there's about 100 members of the US House and 25 members of the US Senate. That's a quarter of each body who are so enmeshed with the Chinese, the Cubans, or the Iranians, or with the local communist parties, Communist Party USA, Democratic Socialists of America, Liberation Road, or certain other groups, or some Islamic groups, they're so enmeshed with those, they couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus. But there are no background checks in Congress. There are none. You can serve on the Homeland Security Committee. You can chair the Intelligence Committee like Adam Schiff. There are no background checks. Now, do you think the Chinese know about this? Do you think the Iranians know this?
Sure.
And do you think maybe they might try and exploit it? Because you think about this. You're sitting in Beijing and you hate President Trump because he's not given you what all the other presidents gave you. You hate him. So what do? Do you get in a multi-billion-dollar trade war, or do you get in a multi-trillion-dollar shooting war, which you may lose, or do you spend a few $1 million buying up American politicians to work against them? What's the cheapest deal? What's the most deniable and safest? Because there's no background checks on Congress. There's no security checks. You saw what the FBI was like over Hillary Clinton.
Oh yeah,
the free pass they gave
completely
her.
Rotten. Yeah.
Well, they're not. They have not investigated congressmen or senators for subversive activities, communist or Islamic ties since before World War II. Now they'll investigate them if they know they're working with the mob or doing big, construction scams or whatever.
But they don't investigate political conspiracy. No, that's
they
right.
don't. They don't.
And you're right. China it's a lot cheaper to buy up a few congressmen. It's even cheaper to drop a few vials of biological weapon, as we started talking about.
So you get say 10 of your agents into the Senate and 12 of them into the Congress, and then you let a biological weapon go, and you get those agents to attack the president, and defend China. Isn't that what you do?
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty. I mean, anyone who takes even a cursory look at what's going on now can see that. I mean, and it can see how there are certain people in Congress who are actually touting the Chinese line.
Yeah, Judy Chu is one. Judy Chu, California. She's and Grace Meng. Well, Judy Chu had a long connection with the Communist Workers' Party, pro-Chinese communist group. Grace Meng, who is leading the charge on this spurious charge, Trump is promoting anti-Asian racism. They're holding hearings on this. Grace Meng is very tied to a pro-North Korean group. She's also very tied to Asian Americans for Equality in New York, great big organization that used to be known as the Communist Workers' Party. So you have got people in your Congress towing the Chinese line and the Iranian line and the North Korean line and the Cuban line and the Venezuelan line. And all of these tend to overlap because they all hate America and they're all working together. So that's why I say, the biggest enemy is the enemy within. If every one of those Democrats was a patriot, do you think they'd be behaving like they are today?
Right? No, of course not. I mean, it's obvious to me. I mean, there, as you say in your book, White House Reds. I mean, and say congressional Reds.
Yeah. I mean, well, my next book is on the Senate. Then I'll do another one on the Congress. But there's a quarter of the Senate who's working for the other team. And they're all the leaders of the committees. This is Dianne Feinstein. This is senior Leahy.
Right.
These are the senior Congress members. And the same in the Senate. The head of Homeland Security, Benny Thompson, has a long history with the Cubans. He worked with Fidel Castro to bring American Congress to Cuba to give them free training in the Cuban medical school. Now they're all over America, these sons and daughters of American communists subverting America. Adam Schiff has long connections with the Chinese. There's two Communist Party supporters serving right now on the Armed Services Committee. Mark, what's his name? Mark Vasey out of Texas and Joe Courtney out of Connecticut. So they have strong links to the pro-Chinese Communist Party USA. Courtney serves on the Armed Services Committee. He heads the Submarine Technology Committee. The Chinese are challenging us in the Pacific right now on submarines, and he is working with the pro-Chinese Communist Party while chairing the Submarine Committee on Armed Services. There's no background checks. These people could not pass a background check to drive your kids to school.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing that that's the case, and that they're in touch with and have their hands on the most top secret information. The insiders making decisions. It's really a shocking expose, and it's almost makes you speechless. But it hasn't changed since the days of Franklin Roosevelt when he was surrounded by communists living in the White House.
Look. There was 400 at least Soviet agents in his administration. They were running it. They set up the World Health Organization, which is now run by the Chinese. The head of it, the general secretary of it, is an Ethiopian Maoist communist who loves China. The previous secretary was a Hong Kong Chinese who was elected by the Chinese. They control the World Health Organization, which is soft on China and didn't warn us about the epidemic until it had to. But back to Roosevelt, he had 400 agents around him. They set up the United Nations. They set up the International Monetary Fund. They set up a whole lot of American domestic policy, and they basically betrayed China. Then the same people later on, their second generation betrayed Vietnam and Korea. So, this is America's biggest problem is internal subversion. And when the Communist Party supporter, John Conyers, who was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, which oversees the FBI and the Justice Department, abolished your House Un-American Activities Committee back in the 70s, that was your last line of internal defense. Since that time, there has been none. Yeah. And your enemies have taken advantage of it.
Yes, they have, and they have the high ground in American, not just politics, but in American culture, in American academia, in American institutions, and even in American Hollywood, even American religion.
And my next movie is Enemies Within the Church, and that will shock you.
Oh, that's amazing! Great topic. Trevor Loudon, I want to thank you for joining me today. I just want to again mention the book is White House Reds. and you had a documentary called Enemies Within, all worthy projects that we should view.
You can see them both on it. Well, White House, The Enemies Within has been seen 2 million times on Amazon Prime. Okay. So you look at it, check it out on Amazon Prime. My book, White House Reds, Communists, Socialists, and Security Risks Running for US President 2020. That's available on Amazon, or you can go to my website, trevorloudon.com, get a signed copy there. But they're both available on Amazon.
Excellent. And listen, Trevor, I want to again thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Look, a pleasure, Charles. Call again sometime. It's been a great debate. It's great talk.
Will do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.